The heat of the mid-afternoon sun seemed to stretch across the dusty road of Sunset Valley Park, a modest trailer park just outside of the city. Marcus Johnson, a 42-year-old black man with a weathered face and hands stained with grease from years of fixing cars, sat outside his small trailer, staring blankly at the envelope in his hand. It was his last paycheck, a month's severance pay from the very place that had fired him just that morning. The thought of it made his stomach twist. Marcus had always been the best mechanic in town. With over 23 years of experience, a master's degree in automotive engineering, and 3 patents under his belt for fuel efficiency systems, Marcus was well respected by those who truly understood the craft. But in the world he now lived in, none of that mattered. His skin color, his background, and his perceived intimidation factor had all led to his dismissal from Almeida Motors, a mediocre repair shop that catered to an elite clientele. The manager had said it straight: "Your presence is scaring away our best customers." Marcus had tried to hide the hurt behind a calm exterior, but the sting lingered. As he sat on the metal steps of his trailer, the weight of his situation pressed down on him. His daughter Zoe was at school. Thankfully, she wouldn't have to see him like this. He'd promised himself that he would provide for her, protect her from the struggles he had faced in life. But now he wasn't sure how he would keep his promise. His severance pay wouldn't last long, and with no job prospects in sight, Marcus couldn't help but wonder how much longer they could survive in their modest home. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the negative thoughts. It wasn't like him to give in to despair. He had faced hardships before. He'd been through so much in his life. But somehow the weight of this situation felt heavier. The metallic taste of defeat lingered on his tongue. The sound of an engine struggling to keep running broke him from his thoughts. Marcus looked up and saw a shiny champagne-colored Range Rover rolling down the road of the trailer park, its sleek exterior an anomaly in the otherwise humble neighborhood. It came to a stop just a few feet from his trailer, smoke billowing from the hood. The driver's door swung open, and a woman stepped out. She was around 35, impeccably dressed in designer clothes that stood out sharply against the surroundings. Her perfectly styled hair and heels suggested she was far removed from the modest lives of the people around here. She looked at her phone for a moment, clearly frustrated, before turning her gaze to Marcus. "Are you a mechanic?" Her voice was sharp, tinged with impatience. Marcus couldn't help but chuckle softly despite the situation. "I'm an automotive engineer," he replied, correcting her automatically. He wasn't just some average mechanic. He had designed cutting-edge systems for hybrid cars. He had revolutionized the industry, or at least tried to. "What's the problem?" he asked, already approaching the vehicle. The woman seemed to eye him for a moment, clearly unsure about his ability to help. But her frustration seemed to outweigh her doubts, and she quickly answered, "My car just died. I need to get to a meeting in an hour, and the repair shops I called won't be here for at least 2 hours. Can you help me?" Marcus assessed the situation. The smoke rising from the hood told him that the engine was overheating. It wasn't unusual for luxury cars, especially those with hybrid systems, to have such issues. But this one was different. He glanced at the model, a Quantum ZX by Sinway Technologies, a luxury electric vehicle that cost more than 5 years of his previous salary. He had worked for Sinway Technologies years ago, designing part of the very system that powered this car, but that was before everything went wrong. "I can take a look," Marcus said, his voice calm. He knew what he was dealing with. He didn't need to be intimidated by the expensive vehicle or the high-maintenance woman standing before him. This was his domain. As he lifted the hood, he was hit with a mix of familiar and unfamiliar elements. The cooling system had clearly failed. Overheating was often caused by a faulty thermal regulator. But this particular model was equipped with Sinway's latest hybrid system, which was far more complicated than anything Marcus had worked on before. He had been part of the original team that designed it. But after being wrongfully accused of intellectual property theft, Marcus had been kicked out. The bitter memories of his time at Sinway flooded back, but he pushed them aside. This wasn't about his past. It was about helping this woman. Marcus worked with precision, his hands steady as he examined the engine. "It's the thermal regulator," he muttered under his breath. The system was designed to switch between electric and combustion modes seamlessly, but the temperature rise during transitions caused stress on the system. It was a design flaw, a flaw Marcus knew all too well. He had designed parts of this system, and if he were still at Sinway, he would have fixed it long ago. "How could you know that?" the woman asked, her voice betraying her surprise. She watched him with growing curiosity. Marcus smiled faintly. "I worked on this system years ago when I was with Sinway." His voice was steady, but internally, he was still reeling from the fact that the very system he had helped design had caused so many problems. "It's a simple fix," he added, "but you'll need to replace the thermal regulator eventually." He worked for another hour, using the tools he'd collected over the years to carefully fix the issue. His hands were dirty, but his focus was unwavering. The woman watched him, her previous impatience now replaced by genuine interest. Finally, he stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. "It should be good for now. I've improved the efficiency by about 12%. You should be able to get to your meeting," he said, stepping back from the car. The woman got into the car and started the engine. The car hummed to life, smoother and quieter than before. She raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "That's incredible," she said, genuinely surprised. "How much do I owe you?" Marcus hesitated for a moment. He was out of work, and the money would certainly help. But something in him resisted the idea of charging for something that seemed too simple, especially considering the unfairness he had faced over the years. "Nothing," he said simply. "I'm between jobs at the moment." The woman looked at him, clearly confused. "I don't think you understand. This is a luxury vehicle, and I can't let you walk away without compensating you. You fixed it when no one else could." Marcus shook his head. "I can't take any money. It's just what I do." The woman's expression softened, and for the first time, she seemed to recognize something deeper about him. "I'm Christine Sinway," she said, taking out a business card. "Director of Operations at Sinway Technologies." The name hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. Sinway. The company that had stolen his work, ruined his career. He was speechless for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "Marcus Johnson," he said, his voice flat, "former automotive systems engineer at Sinway." Christine studied him for a moment, and then, as though recognizing something in his eyes, she handed him her business card. "I want to hear more about your ideas for improving our hybrid system. Call me tomorrow," she said, her tone serious. As she drove away, Marcus stood there for a long time, staring at the card in his hand. The past that he had tried so hard to forget had come rushing back, and he knew that this was his chance. His chance not just for redemption, but for a much larger change. The woman who had once been just another stranger was now his key to unlocking a future he had almost given up on. The next day, Marcus found himself staring at the business card Christine Sinway had given him. The name, Sinway Technologies, burned into his mind like a scar. For years, he had tried to move on from the pain, but this moment, this card, threatened to pull him right back into the heart of everything he had lost. He sat at the kitchen table in his modest trailer, the sun setting outside, casting a warm glow over everything that had seemed so far out of reach. The same trailer where he had fought just to survive, now standing as a reminder of everything that had gone wrong in his life. His daughter Zoe came in, her book bag slung over her shoulder, noticing the card in his hand. Her curious eyes narrowed as she sat down next to him. "What's that, Dad?" she asked, clearly noticing the tension in his body. Marcus hesitated. He had always tried to shield Zoe from the harshness of his life, but she was no fool. At 16, Zoe was perceptive, intelligent, and already had an impressive grasp of engineering and design. She had inherited more than just his looks. She had his mind too. "It's from Christine Sinway," Marcus replied slowly, his voice tight. "She's the sister of James Sinway, the CEO of Sinway Technologies." Zoe's eyes widened in surprise. "Sinway Technologies? The company that, well, you know." She didn't finish the sentence, but both of them knew exactly what she meant. "Yeah," Marcus said, his voice low. "The same company that stole my work. The company that ruined me." His hands clenched around the card. "I never wanted anything to do with them again, Zoe. But now, well, now she wants to talk." Zoe studied her father for a moment before speaking with surprising maturity for her age. "Dad, you always say that opportunities don't come twice. Maybe this is your chance to get back at them, to show them who you really are." Marcus looked at his daughter, a mixture of pride and pain in his eyes. She was right, but the years of rejection, the long stretch of silence from the industry he loved, made him hesitant. How could he trust that this wasn't just another ploy to exploit him? After everything, how could he believe that anything good could come from them? But Zoe's words kept running through his mind. Opportunities don't come twice. He had spent so much of his life fighting for a chance to prove himself, and here it was, sitting in front of him like a gift he couldn't afford to waste. That night after Zoe went to bed, Marcus sat in the dim light of his trailer, the faint hum of his refrigerator the only sound. He stared at the small shed out back, where his most secret project, the one he had been working on for the past 8 years, was hidden beneath a tarp. It was an advanced fuel-electric hybrid system, the very system that Sinway Technologies had stolen from him. Maybe it's time, Marcus thought as he stood up. Maybe it's time to finish what I started. He walked to the shed, each step heavier than the last. As he pulled off the tarp, he ran his fingers across the cold metal of his invention. It was everything he had poured his heart and soul into, every ounce of pain, every failure, every moment of triumph. And now it was finally time for him to show the world. Early the next morning, Marcus made the call. He wasn't sure why he felt compelled to do it, but he dialed the number on the card Christine had given him. After a few rings, her voice answered, calm and professional. "Hello, Mr. Johnson. I'm glad you called. I'd like to meet today at 2 p.m., if that's convenient." Marcus hesitated for a moment, but he knew he had to go. "I'll be there," he said, his voice steady. He hung up the phone and stared out the window of his trailer. The day felt like any other, but he knew it wasn't. This could change everything, for better or for worse. By 2 p.m., Marcus found himself standing in front of Sinway Technologies' gleaming headquarters. The building loomed over him, its modern steel and glass facade reflecting the sunlight. It was an imposing sight, one that reminded him of the world that had rejected him, the world that had taken everything he had worked for and left him with nothing. But today, Marcus had something different. He had his work, his proof that his talent hadn't gone unnoticed, and he was going to walk into that building, into the very belly of the beast, and show them what they had lost when they threw him out. As he walked into the lobby, heads turned. The receptionist gave him a polite but wary smile. Marcus couldn't blame her. His appearance, middle-aged, black, and wearing a simple, worn-out shirt and pants, was far removed from the slick, polished executives that filled the building. But it didn't matter. He wasn't here to fit in. He was here to remind them of what they had overlooked. Christine greeted him in the lobby, her smile more subdued than before. "Mr. Johnson, thank you for coming," she said, leading him past the sleek elevators and into a conference room. The space was modern, with minimalist decor and expansive windows offering a view of the city skyline. A few engineers sat around the table, their eyes scanning him with mild curiosity. As Marcus took a seat, he noticed the tension in the air, the undercurrent of unease. They didn't know what to make of him. This man who had been cast aside by their company, but now was sitting at their table, offering them something they desperately needed. "Mr. Johnson," Christine began, "we've been facing some challenges with the Quantum ZX system, and we believe you may have the expertise we need. I'm offering you a short-term consulting role to help us improve the design. What we discussed on the phone is just the beginning. If this goes well, there could be more opportunities for you down the line." Marcus listened intently, his gaze never leaving her face. He had heard this kind of talk before. Offers that seemed genuine at first but were laced with ulterior motives. But this time, it felt different. This time it felt like an opportunity to reclaim everything he had lost. "I've seen your Quantum ZX system. I know exactly what's wrong with it," Marcus said, his voice calm. "And I'm willing to help, but on one condition." Christine raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "No restrictions," Marcus replied. "No limits on my access. I want full control over the system, just me and my daughter. We'll fix this, but you have to trust me." Christine studied him for a moment before nodding slowly. "You'll have your access. I'll personally ensure you have everything you need." As they continued their discussion, Marcus felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about fixing a broken system. It was about something much bigger. It was about redemption. It was about proving to the world and to himself that he could still rise, that he could still build something better, no matter the odds stacked against him. When the meeting ended, Marcus stood and walked out of the room, his head held high. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. This time, he wasn't going to let anyone steal what was rightfully his. The day after the meeting, Marcus and Zoe made their way to Sinway Technologies' state-of-the-art laboratories. As the morning sun streamed through the windows of his old Dodge Ram, Marcus felt the weight of the past few days pressing on him. The promise of redemption, the chance to finally reclaim his legacy. It was all within his reach now, but it felt both exhilarating and heavy at the same time. Zoe, sitting in the passenger seat, was unusually quiet. Her sharp eyes, always alert to the details, glanced at the surroundings as they drove through the streets toward the corporate headquarters. The change in their lives had happened so suddenly, but Zoe knew how much this meant to her father. She also knew that for Marcus, it was not just about the technology or the recognition, it was personal. This was the moment he had dreamed of, but the hurt was still there, festering deep inside him. "You nervous?" Zoe asked as they pulled into the parking lot of Sinway Technologies. Marcus looked over at her, offering a soft, reassuring smile. "I've been through worse," he replied, his voice steady but carrying the weight of everything he had endured. They walked through the lobby, Zoe by his side, a stark contrast to the bustling corporate world surrounding them. The high glass walls, the polished marble floors, everything here screamed success, wealth, and power. And yet, as they passed by the sleek elevators and walked toward the lab, Marcus felt the strange, familiar sensation of not belonging. He had been an outsider for too long to be fooled by appearances. Inside the lab, the team was already waiting for them. The engineers, clearly well-versed in cutting-edge technology, paused their work to look up when Marcus entered. He stood at the doorway, sizing up the room. The equipment, the prototypes, they were impressive, but he saw the flaws, the potential for improvement. These engineers were capable, but they lacked the vision that Marcus had spent years perfecting, the vision that had once been stolen from him. Christine stepped forward, offering him a warm handshake. "I'll give you and Zoe full access to the lab. No restrictions, just like we agreed," she said, her voice sincere but with an edge of impatience. "You have 24 hours to make the necessary changes before the big demo." Marcus nodded, taking in the room. Zoe stood quietly beside him, watching her father with an intensity that made her proud. She could see the fire in his eyes, the same fire that had been in his eyes when he was fixing things as a young man, long before Sinway had taken everything from him. "I'll need the current diagnostic reports and access to the original prototypes," Marcus said, his voice commanding. He didn't wait for permission, but simply walked to the workstation and started setting up. He knew that time was of the essence. The company needed a solution, and Marcus was the only one who could give it to them. As the hours passed, Marcus and Zoe worked side by side, the quiet hum of machines and the occasional clicking of tools echoing in the lab. The engineers who had once eyed him with skepticism now watched him with growing respect. They were beginning to see what Christine had recognized. Marcus wasn't just an old man with a past. He was a genius. He was the key to unlocking the future of their technology. Marcus didn't waste time explaining himself or his past to anyone. He didn't need to. His work spoke for itself. As Zoe assisted him in connecting the Sisha engine prototype to Sinway's diagnostic systems, Marcus began making adjustments to the Quantum ZX. The adjustments were subtle at first, tweaks here and there to improve the system's thermal efficiency and manage the flow of energy between the hybrid engine's electric and combustion modes. By the time night had fallen, the team had gathered around, watching in silence. Marcus didn't acknowledge their stares. He was too focused on the task at hand. Zoe stood back, observing the way her father worked. There was a quiet intensity in him, a drive she had always admired. He wasn't just fixing a car or a system, he was rebuilding his life, one wire, one part at a time. "Let's test it," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the stillness. The moment of truth had arrived. Christine, who had been watching from the sidelines, stepped forward. Is it ready? Marcus didn't answer right away. He simply gave Zoe a nod. With a flick of her wrist, Zoe started the final sequence, powering up the system. As the Quantum ZX roared to life, the engine hummed with a smoothness that wasn't there before. That's 12% better than the original design, Marcus stated confidently, wiping his hands on his rag. He felt a sense of satisfaction. He had done what he came here to do. But this wasn't just about proving himself. It was about taking back what was rightfully his, about showing the world that no matter how much they tried to break him, he had something they could never take away, his talent. Christine's eyes widened as she heard the engine purr smoothly. Incredible, she said, disbelief in her voice. How did you do that so quickly? Marcus didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to explain his methods. The results spoke louder than words ever could. But Christine wasn't finished. Marcus, she said, her tone softer now, I'm offering you a chance. If this works, I want to offer you a permanent position at Sinway Technologies as our Director of Innovation. You'll have full access to our resources, to everything you need to continue developing your work. Marcus took a deep breath, allowing her words to sink in. A permanent position at Sinway? After everything. It felt like a dream come true, but Marcus knew he had to be cautious. He had been burned before, and he wasn't about to fall into the same trap again. But this time, he had something he hadn't had before. His daughter by his side and his own integrity intact. I'll think about it, Marcus replied, his voice steady but calm. But there's one thing I need before I make any decisions. What's that? Christine asked, clearly intrigued. I need full control of the Sisha system, Marcus said, his gaze unwavering. No strings attached. This is my work, my intellectual property. I'll share it with Sinway, but I'm not giving it up without the proper recognition. Christine nodded, her expression serious. I can work with that, she said, her voice low. We'll make sure everything is done right. As they walked toward the exit, Marcus felt a shift in the air. The tension had eased, but it wasn't just because he had completed the job. It was because he knew he had won. He had stood his ground, rebuilt his reputation, and now he was in control. For the first time in years, Marcus allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. The fight wasn't over yet, but he had finally begun to take back what was his. And with Zoe by his side, he knew they could face whatever came next. The day after Marcus and Zoe completed the necessary adjustments to the Quantum ZSX, the atmosphere at Sinway Technologies was tense. The company's entire future hinged on the successful launch of the Quantum ZX, and the team was pushing hard to ensure everything was perfect. Despite Marcus's success in improving the hybrid system, the shadow of uncertainty still loomed over Sinway. Marcus was walking through the sprawling corridors of Sinway's headquarters when he was called into a meeting with Christine. The once formidable CEO, James Sinway, had been conspicuously absent for most of the day, leaving his sister to handle the situation. As Marcus entered the conference room, Christine was sitting at the head of a long table, papers scattered in front of her. There was an aura of quiet authority around her, but her expression betrayed the stress she was under. Marcus, we need to talk, Christine said, gesturing for him to sit down. There's something I didn't expect, and I need your help. Marcus sat down slowly, his mind racing. What's going on? He asked, his voice calm, but with an underlying edge of curiosity. Christine sighed deeply. James is not happy with the changes you made to the Quantum ZX. He's been under pressure from the board to deliver the product, and the improvements you made are unexpected. He's afraid of how this will affect his reputation and his control over the company. Marcus felt a slight knot in his stomach. He had anticipated that James would resist the changes, but hearing it from Christine made the situation feel all the more real. He could feel the weight of his past, the betrayals, the manipulation, and now it seemed like he was up against the man who had once ruined him. I'm here to help, Marcus replied coolly, trying to keep his emotions in check. But this isn't just about James. It's about fixing the system and making sure it works. Sinway has the potential to be a leader in sustainable technology. It's time we actually lived up to that potential. Christine's face softened slightly as she leaned forward. I know you're right. But this isn't just about fixing the Quantum ZX. It's about everything James has built. If you change too much too quickly, you might tear down more than just the system. You might tear down the company. Marcus understood what she meant. James had built Sinway Technologies on the foundation of intellectual property theft and exploiting talent. But in a way, this wasn't just about his work. It was personal. The company had stolen his ideas, tarnished his name, and held him back for so long. Now he had the power to do something about it. But Christine was right about one thing. This was a delicate balance. "So, what do you want from me?" Marcus asked. "I need you to give James some time," Christine said, her voice hesitant. "Let him save face. Let him think that he has control over the situation. But after the launch, after the world sees what the Quantum ZX can really do, I want you to take your rightful place at Sinway Technologies. You'll have full access to the systems and the patents. But for now, just help us get through this launch." Marcus weighed her words carefully. He could feel the stakes in the air. This was more than just about technology. It was about his redemption, his reputation, and his future. If he played his cards right, he could take control of Sinway's future. But if he moved too fast, he might lose everything. He leaned back in his chair, his mind working through the possibilities. "You want me to play along, to let James think he's still in control?" Christine nodded, her expression serious. "Yes, but once we're past the launch, things will change. You'll be in charge. You and Zoe will lead the future of Sinway Technologies. You'll be the ones calling the shots." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking of Zoe and what she had told him earlier about taking opportunities when they arose. This was his chance, his one chance to rewrite his future and Zoe's future. "All right," Marcus said finally, his voice firm. "But only if we get full control over the intellectual property. No more stealing from people. If I'm going to be part of this company, I need to know that the system will be different. No more cutting corners. No more manipulation. From now on, everything has to be transparent." Christine's eyes lit up with gratitude. "I can make that happen," she said, nodding. "But James will be difficult. Just be careful." Later that afternoon, the much-anticipated launch event for the Quantum ZX took place. The grand auditorium was filled with executives, media representatives, and investors, all eager to see the hybrid car that Sinway had touted as the next big thing. James Sinway stood at the front of the stage, presenting the car with a flourish. "This is it," James said, his voice booming through the microphone. "The future of hybrid technology, the Quantum ZX, designed by Sinway Technologies to revolutionize the automotive industry." Behind him, the large screen displayed images of the sleek, futuristic vehicle, showcasing its design and features. James beamed with pride, knowing that this was his moment. But Marcus and Zoe were sitting in the back, watching intently, knowing that the real story was about to unfold. The demonstration began, but instead of the expected test drive and performance metrics, the screen flickered and internal documents began to appear. Emails, memos, and confidential reports that revealed the truth about Sinway's practices over the years. The evidence of how James had exploited countless engineers, stolen ideas, and manipulated the system to build his empire. The audience fell silent as they realized what was happening. James tried desperately to stop the presentation, but every attempt only led to more damaging revelations being exposed. Marcus stood up, his voice calm but filled with power. "What you're seeing is the real story behind Sinway Technologies," Marcus said, stepping into the spotlight. "The story of how James Sinway built his empire not on innovation, but on theft, and how he has stolen from talented people like me, for years." The room erupted in chaos. Journalists scrambled to document the revelations, while investors and executives rushed for the exits. James tried to lash out, but security was already on him, dragging him off the stage. As Marcus spoke, Christine stood behind him, watching the unraveling of the man who had once ruled Sinway. She had seen the truth, and now it was being laid bare for everyone to see. After the chaos, Marcus turned to Christine, his expression somber. "It's over," he said quietly, "but it's just the beginning." The fallout from the launch event was swift and brutal. Sinway Technologies' stock plummeted, and James was removed from his position as CEO. The company faced multiple lawsuits, and an independent investigation into their practices was launched. But for Marcus, the victory was bittersweet. He had exposed the truth, but it had come at a cost. As the dust settled, Marcus found himself standing at the forefront of a new chapter. The world had seen what Sinway had become, and it was up to him to rebuild it into something better. Something that was founded on integrity, transparency,